I can still remember the day everything changed. It wasn't dramatic, like in the movies where someone gets a letter or receives a life-altering phone call. It was more subtle, quiet in the way the world shifts around you without asking for permission. I used to think I had it all figured out. My life was comfortable. I had Jake. He was the man I thought I could trust with everything, my heart, my time, my future. I thought our love was the kind of thing that would last forever. But forever ended one night, in a way I didn't see coming. I remember the night he told me. I was sitting on the couch, just a typical evening. Jake came home late, something that had become all too common recently. But that night, something in his face was different. He sat down next to me, his gaze distant, and I could feel the weight of what he was about to say before the words even left his lips. "Jess," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I need to tell you something." I froze, looking at him, trying to read his face. "What's going on?" I asked, my stomach already knotting with dread. And then he said it, the words that shattered everything. "I've been seeing someone else." It was as if the room spun out of control, the sound of his voice echoing in my ears, not fully registering. I asked him to say it again, but it didn't matter. The truth was already there, hanging between us, thick and suffocating. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. I had trusted him with everything. My future, my hopes, my dreams, all of it, tied to him, now lay in pieces on the floor. But worse than that, the worst part of all was that I had seen the signs. I just hadn't wanted to believe them. I thought I could fix it. I thought love would be enough to keep him from leaving. But it wasn't. I don't remember much after that. My world turned into a blur of confusion, anger, and sadness. I left that night, took my things and left, leaving the house that we had shared for what seemed like forever. My thoughts were a mess, tumbling over one another in a chaotic swirl. That night, I didn't know how I was going to survive, how I was going to pick up the pieces of my broken heart and my shattered sense of self. But somehow I did. The first few days were the hardest, but I learned to breathe through the pain, to take each moment as it came. I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to get through it, but something in me refused to give up. Weeks passed, and the anger began to grow inside me. At first, I thought I was just angry at him, and maybe in the beginning, I was. But as time went on, the anger turned into something else. It became a fire, a burning desire to not only survive but to come out on the other side stronger. I had been betrayed, yes, but that wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. I spent my days focusing on the things that made me feel strong. I hit the gym harder than I ever had before. I read books on personal growth and resilience. I learned new skills, ones I had never even considered before. But more than anything, I learned to trust myself again. But there was still a part of me that was missing. A part of me that wanted to make Jake understand what he had done. Not just to me, but to us. He had taken my trust and shattered it, left me feeling worthless. I needed him to feel the weight of his betrayal. I needed him to understand the cost of his actions. It wasn't about revenge, not at first. It was about justice, about making sure I never felt powerless again. And so, I started to plan, quietly, carefully. I knew I couldn't just walk back into his life and demand answers, but I could wait. I could let the situation unfold, and when the time was right, I would show him that the broken could come back stronger than ever. In the meantime, I kept my focus. My body was stronger now, my mind sharper, but something in me still ached, still needed closure, still needed justice. That's when I saw him again. It wasn't a planned meeting. He wasn't supposed to be at the coffee shop, but there he was, sitting at a table across the room, his back turned toward me. I could see the way he was holding himself, like everything was fine, like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I had changed. I wanted to walk up to him, to shout at him, to demand an explanation for why he'd done it, why he'd betrayed me. But I didn't. Instead, I just watched him, a quiet storm of emotions rising inside me. It was like he had never even thought about what this was doing to me, what it had done to us. I didn't approach him. I didn't make a scene. I just sat there, watching, and for the first time in months, I realized something. He wasn't the one who held the power anymore. I did. I watched Jake for a few more minutes, my mind racing. The anger I had felt at first started to burn away, replaced by something stronger, something sharper. It was no longer about what he had done to me. It was about what I was going to do next. I wasn't going to beg for closure. I wasn't going to cry over what we had. I was going to stand tall and reclaim the pieces of me that he thought he had stolen. I stood up slowly, my movements deliberate. I didn't want to run. I didn't want to show him that he still had any control over me. Instead, I walked to the counter, ordered my coffee, and sat down at a table in the corner. I wasn't there to confront him. Not yet. Not until I was ready. But being in the same space, knowing that I could handle this, that was enough for now. The days that followed were like the calm before a storm. I kept my distance, worked on myself, and prepared. The old me, the one who was vulnerable and insecure, was gone. She had been buried under layers of strength and resilience, and every day, that new version of me grew more powerful. But even as I built myself up, I couldn't deny that there was a part of me that wanted to make him pay. I wanted him to feel what I had felt, the heartbreak, the loneliness, the betrayal. It was almost an obsession, this desire to make him understand. But it wasn't just about him. It was about me. It was about showing him and showing myself that I was no longer the same person. I couldn't stay in the same city forever. I needed space. I needed to see something new, breathe something different. I packed a bag and booked a flight to a place I had always wanted to visit, somewhere peaceful, where I could think without the weight of the past hanging over me. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. This was my journey. The trip gave me clarity. The fresh air, the new sights, the quiet mornings spent alone, it all helped me see what I had been missing. I was looking for justice in the wrong places. It wasn't something I could find by confronting Jake. It was something I needed to find within myself. But just as I was starting to feel at peace, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer it. It was from an unknown number, but something in me urged me to pick up. Jess? A familiar voice cracked through the line. It was Jake. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was here, I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to hang up, to cut him out of my life for good. But something told me this was a turning point. The past had been weighing me down for too long, and now I had the power to take it off my shoulders. I took a deep breath and answered. What do you want, Jake? He paused, clearly taken aback by my cold tone. I just want to talk. I know I messed up, Jess, and I need to make things right. I felt a surge of anger rise in me, but I pushed it down. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me again. Not this time. You don't get to make things right, Jake, I said, my voice firm. You already did enough damage. And now, it's time for you to face the consequences of what you've done. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him struggling to find the right words, but there were none. He had nothing left to say that could fix what he had broken. I'm done with you, I added, my heart pounding in my chest. And I'm done with all of this. I hung up, the sound of the phone disconnecting ringing in my ears like a final declaration. That was it. I was finished. I wasn't going to let him control me anymore. I had spent far too long trying to make him understand, trying to make him see the damage he had caused. But the truth was, he wasn't the one who needed to understand. I did. I had to understand that I was enough, that I didn't need his approval or his apology to move forward. I didn't need him in my life anymore. I was stronger than he had ever realized, and I was going to show him that. The next few days felt different, lighter somehow. I could feel the weight of his betrayal lifting off me. The anger that had consumed me for so long was being replaced with a quiet confidence. I had done it. I had taken back control of my life, but I knew that my journey wasn't over yet. Jake had made me stronger, yes, but he had also left scars. And while I didn't need his apology to move forward, there was still one thing I needed to do. I needed to show him that I was no longer the person he had betrayed. I needed to make sure that he understood the cost of his actions. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming what was mine. The next few weeks felt like a blur. I was focused, determined, but I couldn't help the lingering thoughts that still circled my mind. The day I had hung up on Jake, I knew I'd made the right choice, but something inside me still needed closure. I needed to feel that final act of justice, show him that I had moved on and that I wasn't the person he had left behind. I wasn't about to let him think that he could walk away unscathed. He had broken me, sure, but he had also underestimated me. I had something he didn't: strength, the kind that grows from pain, from surviving the things that almost break you. and I was stronger than I had ever been before. But now, I was back. Home. The city which had once felt like a prison, now felt like a battleground. The place where everything had started, and where it would end. I hadn't seen Jake since that phone call, but I knew he was still around. He'd been busy rebuilding his life, just like I had. But unlike him, I wasn't trying to forget. I was preparing. I spent my days getting back to the life I had put on hold. I reconnected with old friends, spent time focusing on myself, on rediscovering who I was before all the mess. But at night, when everything was quiet and the world felt still, my thoughts always returned to Jake. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still missing something, that there was something I needed to do. And then, one day, it happened. I ran into him. It was at a small bookstore downtown, a place I frequented for my moments of solitude. I was browsing through the aisles, lost in thought, when I heard a voice I had never wanted to hear again. Jess? I froze. My heart skipped a beat. My pulse quickened. The voice was like a knife cutting through the calm of the bookstore. It was Jake. I hadn't prepared for this. I hadn't expected him to be here. I turned slowly, keeping my face composed, my emotions in check. He looked different, more polished, as if he had moved on from the wreckage we had left behind. His hair was neatly combed, his clothes stylish in that effortless way he always had. He looked like the man I had once loved, the man who had broken my heart. But this time, I wasn't the same person. I was stronger. For a long moment, we just stood there, staring at each other. I couldn't decide if I wanted to walk away or confront him. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let him see the old me, the weak, broken version of me. Well, it's been a while, Jake said, his voice slightly hesitant, but still with that familiarity I used to find comforting. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us, letting him feel the weight of the moment. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm but firm. You shouldn't be here. Jake, I said, my words coming out clear, almost distant. I've moved on. His expression faltered for just a split second, and for the first time, I saw the uncertainty in his eyes. For a moment, I wanted to feel vindicated, to relish in his discomfort, but I didn't. I just felt indifferent. I've made mistakes, Jess, he said, his voice softer now, more vulnerable. I've hurt you, and I'm sorry. I should have never let you go, but I want to fix things. The words he was saying were all too familiar. They were the same empty apologies he had given me before. I'd heard them 1,000 times, and they meant nothing now. You can't fix this, Jake, I said, shaking my head slowly. What's broken can't always be fixed. I'm not the same person I was when I met you, and I'm not going back. His face fell, and for a moment, he looked like the man I had once known. But I didn't feel pity for him anymore. He didn't deserve that. The only thing he deserved now was to watch me live the life he had tried to ruin. I turned to walk away, but then I paused, looking back at him one last time. I hope you understand, Jake, I said, my voice hardening. What I am now. I built this, and I'm not going to let you take it away from me. Not again. I walked out of the bookstore, my steps steady, my heart resolute. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It wasn't about proving anything to Jake. It was about me proving to myself that I had come through the other side of all this. I had faced my demons and survived. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need him in my life. I was whole again. Walking away from Jake that day felt like shedding a heavy weight I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. For so long, I had been defined by the hurt he caused me, by the version of myself that had been lost in the aftermath of betrayal. But now, I could finally breathe. I wasn't that broken person anymore. I had rebuilt myself, and I was stronger because of it. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I went home, unpacked my thoughts, and let the feelings of closure settle in. I didn't have to keep reliving the past. It had no power over me anymore. And yet, there was still that nagging sense of justice, that quiet voice inside me that reminded me I hadn't finished what I started. Jake hadn't just hurt me. He'd taken something that was mine, my trust, my security, my belief in love. And I needed to make sure he understood the consequences of his actions. Not because I wanted him back, but because he needed to see that there was a price for what he'd done. That I wasn't just some fool who could be discarded and forgotten. The next few days, I kept myself busy. I worked. I spent time with friends who reminded me of who I was before all the pain. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about Jake. Not out of longing, but out of resolve. I knew what had to be done. I wasn't going to let him think that he could get away with it, that he could just move on while I was left to pick up the pieces. It was time to make my move. I started by going through everything I had learned about Jake's business dealings, the little things I had picked up on over the years, the late nights, the phone calls, the people he associated with. It was always about power with Jake, about control. And in a way, I had been just another part of his conquest, another piece he could manipulate to get what he wanted. I wasn't naive anymore. I knew how he worked, how he thought, and I knew exactly how to get his attention. It wasn't going to be a grand confrontation, not yet. I didn't need to make a scene. I just needed to get close enough to make him feel the weight of the world shifting beneath him. A week later, I found myself walking into one of his favorite spots, a restaurant he frequented for business meetings. I had kept track of his schedule over the past few days, learned when he was likely to be there. My heart raced as I approached the entrance. This was it, the moment I would finally let him see who I had become. I stepped into the restaurant and scanned the room. There he was, sitting at a corner table, laughing with a colleague. The same easy charm he had always used to draw people in. He didn't notice me at first, and I couldn't help the small smile that crept across my face. This time, it was my turn to watch. I waited until the right moment, until I saw his back turned toward me. Then, I walked straight to the bar and took a seat, not far from where he was sitting. I didn't need to approach him directly. All I needed was for him to see me, to realize I was in the same space as him again, and soon enough, he did. He turned, his eyes locking on mine from across the room. For a second, his expression faltered, like he didn't know whether to stand up, to call out, or to just pretend I wasn't there. But I didn't give him the satisfaction of reacting. I didn't look away. I kept my gaze steady, watching him, watching how the realization of seeing me again hit him. The power had shifted. He wasn't the one who held control anymore. He stood, his movements stiff, and walked over to me, his usual confidence now tempered by uncertainty. When he reached me, he hesitated, clearly unsure of how to start this conversation. "Jess," he said, his voice low, "I didn't expect to see you here." I glanced up at him slowly, my eyes locking with his, no sign of the weakness he had once exploited. "Funny, I didn't expect to see you either." The silence that followed hung in the air between us. It wasn't the awkward kind of silence. It was thick with meaning, with all the things that had gone unsaid, all the hurt and betrayal that still lingered. I wasn't here to fight. I wasn't here to beg for answers or to have a conversation about the past. I was here to make sure Jake knew that the chapter we had started together was over. And this time, I was in control. "I see you've moved on," I said, my tone casual, but there was an edge to it. "I hope she knows what she's getting into." Jake's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "You don't get to judge me anymore. You don't know what it's like to. I don't need to know what it's like." I cut him off, my voice steady. "I'm not interested in your excuses. I've spent enough time letting you make me feel small. You took something from me, Jake, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." His face hardened at my words, but I could see the flicker of regret in his eyes. Maybe he realized, finally, that I wasn't the same person who had once begged for his love. I was someone else now. Someone who had learned to stand on her own, who had learned that the only way to move forward was to let go of the past. "You should go," I said, my voice now colder. "I've got nothing left to say to you." Jake stood there for a moment, longer, as if trying to decide whether he should say something else. But then he finally turned and walked away, and for the first time, I didn't feel any sense of loss. No longing, no need for closure. I had finally closed the door on him. The days that followed felt like I was walking with a new purpose, one I hadn't had before. I no longer needed to explain myself to anyone, especially not to Jake. I had set my boundaries, made it clear where I stood, and in a way, I felt lighter. I wasn't trapped by the ghost of who I used to be. The past still existed, but it no longer had a hold over me. I kept myself busy, but this time, it was different. I wasn't drowning myself in distractions to avoid the pain anymore. Instead, I was intentionally building the life I had always dreamed of. I focused on my work, took time for the hobbies I had neglected, and began reconnecting with people who had always been there for me, but whom I had pushed away when I was lost in the chaos of my relationship with Jake. But there was still that quiet, relentless pull, the need to show Jake that he couldn't just walk away. It wasn't about him at this point. It was about me taking back everything I had lost. I needed him to understand that the strength he had crushed within me had come back 1,000 times stronger. I wasn't the girl who needed validation from him anymore. I had to make him realize that. It was a quiet morning when I decided to take my first real step toward making that happen. I had been working on a project for weeks, something that would give me the visibility and recognition I had always deserved. But I hadn't quite expected it to line up with the perfect moment to get Jake's attention. The project I was working on was going to put me in the public eye exactly where I wanted to be. I had spent days preparing, making sure every detail was perfect. This wasn't just a career move. It was a personal statement, a way of showing, not only Jake but everyone, that I was doing just fine without him, that I didn't need to apologize for how I had rebuilt myself. The event was coming up soon, a big showcase for my work, and it was going to be the most high-profile moment of my career so far. I had been keeping it under wraps, knowing that if Jake caught wind of it, he would somehow try to manipulate the situation. But now, I knew the time had come. He would hear about it sooner or later, and I wasn't going to hide from it. I was going to stand tall and let him see exactly what he had walked away from. The event was held in a downtown gallery, a sleek, modern space filled with bright lights and high-end clientele. I walked through the doors that evening, my heart steady but my mind focused. This was it. I had worked for this moment, and I wasn't going to let anyone or anything steal my shine. The night was a whirlwind. I moved through the crowd, talking to clients and colleagues, my confidence radiating as I presented my work. It felt incredible to be so in control of my own life, to know that everything I had accomplished was the result of my hard work and determination. I wasn't waiting for someone to save me or give me validation. I had done this all on my own. But just as the night was in full swing, I saw him, Jake, standing across the room, his eyes locked onto mine. He was with someone, a woman I didn't recognize. She was beautiful, confident, poised, but she wasn't me, and she never would be. My heart didn't skip a beat this time. I didn't feel the sting of jealousy or anger that would have consumed me in the past. Instead, I felt nothing. A sense of calm settled over me as I realized just how far I had come. Jake was a part of my past. He didn't control my future anymore. I could see the hesitation in his eyes as he looked at me, his expression filled with something like regret. It didn't matter. He had made his choices, and now it was my turn to make mine. I turned my attention back to the crowd, refusing to let him take any more of my energy. As I continued talking with a potential client, I couldn't help but feel a sense of power. This was mine. I was building something that was truly my own. As the night wore on, I heard whispers. People were starting to take notice of the work I had put out into the world. The admiration, the respect, it was all falling into place. Jake was no longer the centerpiece of my life. He was a shadow of the past, and I was the one shining now. At one point, I felt a tap on my shoulder. When I turned around, it was Jake, standing there, his posture tense. He wasn't alone anymore. His new girlfriend was just a few steps behind him, watching me curiously. "I didn't expect to see you here," Jake said, his voice softer than usual. I heard about your work. It's impressive." I looked at him, feeling a flicker of satisfaction at his words. He wasn't apologizing, but that wasn't what I needed. He wasn't going to make me feel small or dependent on his approval anymore. "Thanks," I said simply. "I've worked hard for it." For a brief moment, his eyes softened. I could see the weight of the past in his gaze, the realization of what he had lost. But there was no part of me that needed to comfort him anymore. I wasn't the one who needed to apologize. He was. I wish things had turned out differently," he said, his voice trailing off. I gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. "We don't always get what we wish for, Jake, but it's okay. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He didn't respond immediately. His gaze lingered on me for a moment longer, and I saw the regret in his eyes again. But I wasn't going to be the one to fix it. Not anymore. "I'll be okay," I added, my voice steady. "You should go enjoy the evening." With that, I turned back toward the crowd, my heart at peace, knowing that I was in control of my life now. Jake was part of a chapter that had ended long ago, and I wasn't going back. The weeks following the showcase felt like a turning point. It wasn't just about the work anymore, it was about everything that had led up to that moment. I had spent so long running from my pain, trying to avoid the things that had broken me, that I hadn't realized how much strength I had accumulated along the way. The woman who walked out of that gallery that night was unrecognizable compared to the girl who had been left in the wreckage of my past. Jake hadn't reached out again after that night. I didn't expect him to. We had said what needed to be said, and everything else was just noise. I didn't need him in my life anymore, and I was finally accepting that. I wasn't angry, nor was I resentful. I was free. The next few months were dedicated to growth, my own growth. I focused on my career, but more importantly, I focused on myself. I began practicing mindfulness, journaling, and meditating. It was funny, really, how something as simple as learning to sit with my thoughts could be so liberating. I had spent so long running from my emotions, pretending they didn't exist, that I hadn't realized how much power they held. Learning to embrace the ups and downs of life, without fear of judgment, without fear of what others might think, felt like another form of victory. The self-doubt that used to plague me slowly began to dissipate. I wasn't the same person anymore. I was stronger, more sure of myself, and I was reclaiming everything that had been stolen from me: my confidence, my peace, my happiness. One morning, after a particularly peaceful meditation session, I had an epiphany. I realized that I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And that feeling, the one where everything felt aligned, where I knew that I was in control of my own fate, it was intoxicating. But there was still one thing left to do. I had been dodging my final confrontation with Jake. I had seen him from time to time, at social events or in passing, but I had kept my distance. Not out of fear, but because I didn't need to face him. He didn't have the power to affect my life anymore. But I had yet to say what I needed to say, what I had been holding inside for so long. And so one morning, I decided it was time. I knew Jake frequented a cafe in the mornings. It was a quiet place, the kind where people could read their papers or work on laptops in peace. I had driven by it countless times and seen him sitting there, looking content, perhaps unaware of the storm he had left behind. I didn't need to make a spectacle of this. I didn't need to shout at him or cry in front of him. I had already done all of that in my heart. This was about closure, for me. I walked into the cafe, my heart steady but my pulse quickening ever so slightly. I spotted him right away. He was sitting by the window, as usual, with a cup of coffee in front of him. He didn't see me right away, and for a moment, I just stood there, watching him. I could feel the weight of the past lifting off me. This wasn't about reliving the hurt. This wasn't about seeking closure from him. This was about me, taking back my power. I walked up to him and stopped by his table. He looked up, startled, his eyes widening in surprise. "Jess," he said, his voice soft, almost as if he wasn't sure if he was dreaming. I gave him a small, calm smile. "Hi, Jake. Do you mind if I sit down?" He seemed to hesitate for a moment before gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "Of course. I didn't expect." "Well, I didn't expect you to come here." I nodded. "I wasn't sure if I should either, but I've been thinking about something for a while, and I think it's time to say it." Jake nodded, looking both apprehensive and curious. He didn't say anything, but his eyes were on me, waiting. I sat down and took a breath. I hadn't rehearsed what I was going to say, but I knew I had to speak the truth, even if it wasn't what he wanted to hear. "I've spent so much time thinking about what happened between us," I began, my voice steady. "I've been angry. I've been sad. I've even felt betrayed. But what I realize now is that I was never truly angry at you. I was angry at myself for allowing myself to be controlled, for believing that I wasn't enough. But I am enough, Jake. I always was." Jake's face softened, and I saw the guilt flash across his expression. "Jess, I know I hurt you, and I can never take that back. I wish I had done things differently. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm sorry, truly, for everything." I didn't immediately respond. His apology, while sincere, wasn't what I needed anymore. I had already forgiven him long before this moment. Forgiveness wasn't about him. It was about me. It was about letting go of the weight I had carried for so long. "I'm not here for your apology, Jake," I said quietly. "I'm here because I need you to know that I've moved on. I'm not the person you left behind anymore. I'm not broken. I'm stronger than I ever was with you." The silence that followed was heavy, but there was no tension. I wasn't angry. I wasn't seeking anything from him. This was simply me acknowledging my own strength. I think that's all I needed to hear, Jake said, his voice almost as soft, as if he was absorbing what I had just told him. I nodded, a small, peaceful smile spreading across my face. I'm glad we could talk, but I think this is where we part ways for good, Jake. He sat still for a moment, processing my words. Then he stood up, his expression solemn but not without respect. Goodbye, Jess. I stood up, offering him one last look, one last nod of acknowledgement. Then, I walked out of the cafe, not looking back. As I stepped into the sunlight outside, I felt lighter than I had in years. The chapter was finally closed, not because of what Jake had said or done, but because I had learned to let go. I wasn't waiting for someone else to make me whole anymore. I had already done it. I had become whole all on my own. The weeks that followed felt like a new chapter, one I was ready to write on my own terms. Jake's presence, while still lingering in the back of my mind, no longer held the power it once had. It was as though I had crossed an invisible threshold. Every step I took from here on out would be mine, no longer overshadowed by the past. I threw myself into my work with renewed energy. The project I had worked on, my personal passion, was gaining traction, and people were starting to take notice. Clients who had once been skeptical of my abilities now sought me out for advice, and opportunities began opening up in ways I hadn't expected. I was finally reaping the rewards of everything I had worked so hard for, but success didn't just come from work. It came from the internal shift that had taken place within me. I had spent so many years doubting myself, questioning my worth, and letting others define who I was. Now, I was defining myself. I wasn't just the girl who had been betrayed. I was the woman who had rebuilt herself and come out stronger. It was early one morning, while sitting at my favorite cafe alone, for the first time in a long while, that I realized how far I had come. I watched the world outside the window, the sun filtering through the trees as life moved on, completely unaware of the personal transformation I had undergone. The door chimed as it opened, and I looked up instinctively. My heart skipped a beat when I saw who walked in. It was Alex. I hadn't seen him in weeks. After everything that had happened, I had pulled away from most people. I needed space, and Alex respected that. But seeing him again in this moment, I realized how much I had missed him, not just as a friend, but as someone who had been there for me when I was at my lowest. He saw me almost immediately and made his way over with that familiar smile that always managed to make my heart flutter. The tension in my chest eased as he sat down across from me. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice light but with an edge of concern. "I thought we were past that, don't you?" I smiled softly, a little guilty but mostly just relieved to see him. "I'm sorry, Alex. I needed time to figure things out. I wasn't sure how to navigate everything after." "Well, after everything," he nodded, understanding. "You don't owe me any explanations, Jess. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm better than okay," I said with a confidence I hadn't known I could muster. "I'm stronger than I've ever been." The words felt powerful coming from my mouth, and I meant them. I was done carrying the weight of the past, done with allowing it to dictate who I was. My life was mine now, and I was finally free. Alex reached across the table and placed his hand over mine, his touch warm and reassuring. "You've always been strong. You just needed to remember that." His words felt like a balm to the wounds I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. I had spent so long being broken, but now, for the first time in a long time, I could say that I was whole, and I had the strength to face whatever came next. "I'm ready," I said, meeting his gaze. "Ready to take on whatever comes next on my own terms." Alex nodded, his eyes softening. "I'm glad to hear that." It wasn't about Jake anymore. It wasn't even about proving anything to anyone. It was about taking control of my own life, of finally standing tall without the shadow of doubt or fear hanging over me. As we sat there, talking about everything and nothing, I realized how much I had changed. I wasn't the same person who had walked out of Jake's life in the middle of the night, broken and unsure. I wasn't the same person who had questioned her own worth in the aftermath. I was someone who had taken the pain and turned it into something stronger. Someone who was ready to live a life filled with purpose, love, and freedom. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. I didn't need Jake's validation. I didn't need anyone else's approval. All I needed was me, and that was enough. The future stretched out before me, full of possibilities. I didn't know what it would hold, but I knew one thing for certain. I was ready to embrace it with open arms. The following months felt like a blur of new beginnings and possibilities. I had become someone entirely new, someone I was proud of. It wasn't about success in the traditional sense. It wasn't about the work I was doing, or the opportunities that came my way. It was about the way I finally understood my own worth, how I had embraced my own strength. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I had spent so much of my life trying to make others understand me, trying to earn their approval. But now, I realized that the only approval I needed was my own, and I was enough. The last time I saw Jake was months ago at that cafe. After that, we had no more interactions, and honestly, I was grateful for it. I didn't need his presence to define who I was or to mark my success. I had let go of the weight of his betrayal, and in doing so, I had freed myself to truly live. I still thought about him sometimes, but only briefly. I wasn't angry anymore. I had forgiven him, not for his sake, but for mine. Holding on to the past was only keeping me tied to a version of myself that I didn't want to be anymore. And then one day, as I walked down the street, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my pulse quickening as I saw the name on the screen, Jake. I stared at it for a moment, unsure if I even wanted to answer. I hadn't expected this, especially not now, but I had grown enough to know that this moment didn't hold power over me anymore. He couldn't control me, not now, not ever. I swiped the screen to answer the call, taking a deep breath. Hello, my voice was calm, steady. Jess, Jake's voice came through the phone, quieter than I had remembered. I needed to hear your voice again. I've been thinking about you, about everything. The silence hung in the air for a long beat. Part of me had expected him to apologize again, to say the things he thought I needed to hear. But I wasn't interested in hearing his apologies anymore. Not without action. I'm doing great, Jake, I said finally, my voice firm but not unkind. I've moved on, and I'm happy. I don't need anything from you anymore. I heard him exhale, as if a weight had fallen on his shoulders. I never meant to hurt you, Jess. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know, I'm sorry for everything. I felt a slight pang, but it wasn't as sharp as it once would have been. I had already forgiven him, not because he asked for it, but because I needed to let go of the anger I had carried. For so long, forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. I know you are, Jake, I said, the words feeling more like a release than an answer. But we're both moving forward now. I'm not the person I was when we were together, and neither are you. That's okay. We both have to live our own lives now. There was a long silence on the other end, but I didn't feel a need to fill it. He had apologized. I had forgiven him. There was nothing more to say. You're right, Jake finally said, his voice a little softer. I won't take up any more of your time. I just wanted you to know I'm glad you're okay. That's all. Take care of yourself, Jake, I said, my voice steady and kind. Goodbye. And with that, I hung up the phone. For the first time, I didn't feel a weight lifting off my chest. It was different. It was freeing. I had been carrying that call in my head for so long, the idea that one day I would have to face him again, that I would have to go through the pain of hearing him beg for forgiveness. But now, I realized that the real healing had already happened. It had happened within me, and there was nothing left to mend. I stood still for a moment, the hum of the world around me, and I smiled. I felt the sun on my face, the cool breeze brushing through my hair, and I knew I was ready. Ready to face everything ahead of me. Ready to live my life, fully and completely, with no regrets. The past was behind me now. I had learned the hard way, but I had become stronger because of it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving, and no one could take that from me. The world ahead was full of endless possibilities, and I was ready to embrace it. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to face it with the strength and courage I had found within myself. The woman I had always wanted to become was finally here, and nothing could break me now.